Good afternoon, everyone. First off, a huge shout out to the organizers for doing a commendable job with the conference. It's my first time attending TDC, and of course, first time speaking here, so I'm naturally really excited about it. Some solid last few hours. I heard some really insightful talks since morning, so I genuinely hope that all of you find something valuable in the next 40 minutes and learn something new. That's the goal. And I know it's post-lunch, it's 4 o'clock, it's way late in the day. All of us want to just doze off. And most of us, including me, are just running on caffeine and sheer willpower at this hour. So naturally, I thought, what better way to kickstart this story than this visual that you see on the screen. Now you see that person right in the smack, like in the center of the image. In this story, that person is not me. I got trampled 3 screens ago, left for dead, no one noticed. But here I am, rising from the ashes, rising from the dead with that caffeine to get you this story. Now, I absolutely love this picture because I think it beautifully captures the chaotic energy that all of us developers in the room have experienced from time to time. I mean, imagine the inside of that battlefield, the frantic pacing, the battle cries, you feeling that everything is on the line. Well, sometimes that's how we felt in our team at Posten Bring when we were dealing with unruly business rules. A little slight disclaimer, you might see some more disturbing visuals during the presentation, but rest assured, unlike the infamous finale of this web series, our story has a happier and a brighter ending. That gets me to my talk. Basically, how we embrace this chaos. What all steps did we take to untangle the mess we found ourselves in a couple of years back, and how Kotlin Multiplatform was our ally in this journey. Now, before we proceed further, I'm Anshika. I'm representing a very talented team at Posten Bring. I have 12 years of industry experience, of which the past decade has been with Posten Bring, launching and developing solutions that allow millions of people in and around Nordic, people like you and I, and thousands of business to just send and receive packages. Now, how I've compartmentalized the talk is there are 3 overarching sections. The first one is just to get the lay of the land, the problem statement. The second would be what KMP is and how it helped us in our journey. And then just we'll wrap it up with insights gained, lessons learned. Okay, so let's dive straight into the problem statement. I've written complex world of logistics. I've not written Posten Bring there because I genuinely, again, believe that it's not a Posten Bring problem alone. It's not even a logistics problem alone. Logistics, like any other industry, is inherently complex. Let me give you an example. When you book anything online, right from it leaves the warehouse till it reaches your doorstep, there are millions of lines of code and thousands of business rules which enable that very flow. Now, before I proceed further, maybe we have some international audience as well in the room. How many of you have heard of Posten Bring before today? Okay, I'm in Trondheim. I was expecting that. But still, if I saw some people didn't raise their hand, for you, to give you some context, imagine an institute that is as old as your great-great-great-great-great-grandparent. We are almost 400 years old. We just celebrated our 378th year this year. That makes us one of the oldest organizations in the country, maybe even in the world. And of course, the software hasn't been around for that long. But it has been around for decades, and it has been worked on by a lot of different developers. So you can say what we were dealing with, and still are actually, is kind of generational software. And that, in our head, is part of the problem, the complexity here. And what you see on the screen, like what we'll do today in 40 minutes, is just I've condensed it to like simple 4 rules that are understandable for people who are not part of this domain. So we are briefly peeling the onion here. Diverse services, when you book something, you either get it delivered to your house, to a pick-up point, or a parcel locker. Those are diverse services. And coverage, customer access, and special dimension rules, those are self-explanatory. Like I said, this is like just the tip of the iceberg. So you understand the domain, at least, of what we are dealing with. Now, if we get into the problem. Now, when I joined Posten Bring a decade back, we had this huge monolith. And I see some people nodding. It's exactly the image that gets into your head. As a developer, I was so pumped and kicked, did a git clone, got my coffee, and it was still downloading the history of the universe. But this monolith had all the rules centralized. But over the years, because of microservices and other feature development, it was collectively decided to break down this huge beast into more manageable apps. So what you see on the screen is everything, like the front-end apps, the back-end apps, the public APIs, the internal APIs, all different microservices. And don't get me wrong, we are reaping the benefits of not having to deal with that monolith. It's working out fabulously well for us, but for one caveat. If you can spot that X in all the different apps, just take that X as a representative of a business rule. And you see what's happening there. There's no absolute source of truth any longer. It's duplicated, it's inconsistent, it's missing, and it is creating a lot of chaos. Now, show of hands, how many of you here has been this person sifting through millions of lines of code trying to understand what on earth is this code base doing? Oh, I'm so happy to see, I'm not a sadist, but I'm happy to see you're suffering too. And how many of you have cursed your predecessor, like the developer who's written that code? Humanly, that's human nature. And rightly so, because there was a study by JetBrains which said 60 to 70% of the developer's time is spent on understanding code. More than writing code, we are using our time to understand and make that mental map in our head when we start on a project. And that was one of the biggest challenges with this new structure we had. And apart from that, another thing that was really painful for us was debugging this. And I'm not talking about production issues or bugs, of course, that was there, but like a simple request from our product owner saying, hey, how is this service implemented in our API? What all rules are we validating? And that used to take a developer hours to debug the entire flow, only to realize that, hey, that X, that rule is implemented differently in different apps. So it wasn't fun to work with this. And if I try to summarize the pain point here and like just price attached to all of this chaos, there was inconsistent rule set, like we've talked about. It was painfully slow feature development. From ideation to launch, it used to take us months to launch a new service. It was fear-driven development. Even though we were deploying multiple times a day into production, there were some features where we were not sure if this would work in its entirety, like the whole feature flow. And we were spending so much time in maintaining all these apps and testing everything in each of the app that we were touching. And if I sum it up, I think people or developers who had to deal with this code base were there was general discontentment. And that, in my head, is the biggest red flag if you have an unmotivated and unhappy lot working with the code base. So, there is a lag. So what we were chasing, what were our like lofty dreams here? Of course, we wanted duplication to go take a vacation. We wanted maintenance and testing costs to take a nosedive. We wanted to have higher confidence in our code changes. But what we really wanted was this. And I hope Lord of the Rings fan in the room appreciate this visual, because that's what we wanted. We wanted one code base to run them all, exactly like the One Ring, but not to wield dark powers, to just have some semblance of control over these 100,000 business rules that we were dealt with. And my personal favorite is the last point on the slide, which is the last point, but the most important, and that's developer happiness. Because in our head, if we are green in that section, then we are somewhat implicitly doing something good in all the aforementioned points that are on the slide. So we had these lofty dreams. How are we planning to achieve them? Well, back in 2019, what we decided as a team was that every time we get a business feature and all the rules that that business feature was touching, we put our foot down with the help of our product owner and we bought time from business. We said we need to do some technical refactoring. So every time we got a business feature, and all the rules that it was touching in those apps, we plucked those rules out and we dumped it in a common library. And it was just spitting out a JVM artifact, which we were then using as a dependency in our backend APIs. So that person who we all related to a couple of minutes ago, they heaved a sigh of relief because they had some semblance of control for our backend APIs. But that happiness was short-lived because we did it for 2 years, from 2019 to 2021. But in 2021, we realized, hey, our front ends are still unruly. They're still all over the place, the rules. There's no centralized source of truth for our front-end apps. Now, you can see our conundrum in 2021 because we had put in so much work for 2 years to make that library for our backend APIs. We didn't want to have another library for our front-end apps. We somehow wanted to use the same library to power both our backend APIs and validate our front ends. And that's a nice segue into the talk, the main topic of the talk, and that's multi-platform. Now, before we dive into the specifics of how KMP helped us in our journey, we have to take a slight detour. No deep dives because we don't have the time, and it's a huge subject matter, but we'll touch upon basics of KMP so that anyone who's not heard of it can get a foundational understanding of it. And also it will help you correlate with the code snippets that I'm going to show you later on in the talk. So let's get started. Let's start with the basics. What is Kotlin Multiplatform? What you see on the screen is a very watered down definition by our team. It's an open source technology which was built by JetBrains back in 2017. So it's been around for 8 years. I think it was announced in Kotlin Conf. Now, simply put, it allows developers like you and I to write and share common code across different platforms. So very simply, you write code once, and then you run it on different platforms. Now, let's unpack that a bit. Let's flesh it out a bit. What are these platforms? What's the most common use case that this technology is being used for? Fun fact, that's not our use case, and I'll talk about it. And some jargon that, if you're talking about KMP with someone, then you should be aware of these technical jargon that you see on the slide. Now, I've been going on and on about different platforms. What are these platforms that KMP supports today as of 2025? So the whole journey started off with server-side. That's what we use it for. It shifted to mobile platforms, iOS and Android, desktop, Linux, macOS, Windows, and then Web.js and Wasm. So you can see it supports a diverse list of platforms for your app to run on. Now you have all these fancy list of platforms, but what do you share? And that is a million-dollar question. And that is where our team felt that KMP really shined. It differs from its contemporaries and its predecessors here. It's the flexibility for us, or it was the flexibility for us, because you're not required to commit to a full-scale migration with KMP. You can start really small. It's not a zero-sum choice. It's not a binary decision. It's not all or nothing. So you decide what you want to share and then scale up. And I can give you an example how that works. Now, the title says most common use case, and it lists all the mobile platforms. And there's a logical reasoning to it, because Kotlin, even though has seen like a steady increase as a server-side language in the last few years, it's still predominantly used in Android development. So I think JetBrains just shifted their focus to the user group that will benefit the most out of KMP, and that's why this is the most common use case in 2025 for mobile platforms. Any mobile platform developers in the room? Okay, few. I am not one, but we don't need to be one to understand the architectural layers that are there. I can still give a run-through. Data core is just you fetching data, either from a network call via an external integration or through database. Business domain is what I've been going on and on for 15 minutes. UI presentation is just you clicking through views. Now imagine your team has been tasked to build an app which has to run on these 3 platforms. Without KMP, you will be ending up with 3 code bases in 3 different technology stacks. Just imagine the amount of overhead of maintenance and testing these 3 different code bases without KMP. With KMP, you can start, like I said, really small. You can start maybe just sharing those rules, those validation rules. If you're more enthusiastic about it, you can share the data core layer. If you're more adventurous, you can share the presentation layer as well. So you can see there's a progression here. And just to remind, just to reiterate, more is not necessarily good. You can share all the layers, but you don't have to. Like in our case, we're just sharing the business and domain layer, and that's where we stopped. But if you want to, you can share more layers. Now with KMP, the UI still have to be written natively. That's a limitation with KMP right now, because iOS you need to use, I think, Swift UI, and for Android, Jetpack Compose. But I wanted to discuss this as well, because seeing our success with Kotlin Multiplatform, we don't own any mobile platform apps in our team, but Posten Bring has a lot of different mobile apps. And the teams which are responsible for that, seeing our success, have now started to dabble with both Compose Multiplatform and KMP. And what Compose Multiplatform is basically overcoming the limitation of KMP. Now, this is nothing but what JetBrains has done is they've taken Jetpack Compose, and for people who are not well-versed with Jetpack Compose, it's just Kotlin, used to write UIs declaratively, that's it. They've taken Jetpack Compose, which was created by Google, and they've created a framework, which is called Compose Multiplatform, which basically extends this capability to other platforms. So in principle, you can have one code base with all your layers written in one technology stack, and then you can run it on different platforms. The only thing different, for obvious reasons, would be platform-specific code. So we in our team think this is a very ambitious project. Maybe this has it's still in, like you see, it's still in beta and alpha mode, so it's still a work in progress, but come to fruition, I think it would be a success if somebody tries to build an app and run it on all different platforms with one code base. Now, those technical jargons, this is like a common, project structure of a KMP library. Now, your eye would be naturally drawn to that shared module, which has common main, JS main, iOS main. You can have desktop main, like depending on what which platforms you're building your app for. Now, one would think, or let me start with explaining what common main is. Common main is where you and I as developers would dump all the code that needs to be compiled to all platforms. So one would ask, okay, why do we need platform-specific modules? Then why can't we just dump everything in the common main? Would have been really nice and convenient, but in reality, when you're building an app, you can't do that, because when you're building an app, you have to talk to platform-specific APIs for certain tasks. That's inevitable. And Kotlin compiler will not allow you to write code in the common main, which can't be compiled to all platforms. So if you're talking to a platform-specific API, of course, it can't be compiled to all platforms you're building your app for. And for that, we need platform-specific modules. And we achieve that by something called expect actual mechanism. I can give you an example, and it'll be a bit more clear. Suppose you've been tasked to find the underlying operating system of the platform you're building your app for. Now, how you would go about implementing that is you will write the platform agnostic function in common main. You see that? That's just a declaration with the keyword expect. Basically, that keyword is telling the compiler that I actually am expecting a definition or an implementation of this method in the platform-specific modules. And that's what you see there. Because in iOS main and Android main, we are actually implementing that method with the keyword actual, where we are talking to Android and iOS-specific native packages to fetch that operating system. So that's why we need the common main and the platform-specific modules or source sets. There's something called targets, which is basically me as a developer just writing that DSL in the Kotlin block in a Gradle build script. Basically, me telling that Kotlin compiler that you need to compile this code into all these platforms. So in the end, I get JVM class files or JS files or native executables or native binaries for iOS and macOS. And then we have something called source sets and dependencies, and you'll hear this a lot, and this has been one of the pain points with KMP. But you can imagine this being like a POM, or it is POM. It just has a fancy name. Or like Gradle properties or package.json. Because if I give you an example, this is the source set and dependencies from our project. We've written like a robust amount of test cases for our JVM class files and JS class files, and you use JUnit to test, and that's a dependency, and that's what we've categorized under JVM test case. So you can just imagine that all the dependencies you need to compile your code, like POM, you dump it here, but you have to categorize it according to the source set. That's the only difference between a POM and this. So if I wrap this deep dive on steroids now, I'll leave you with the visuals. Actually, all the visuals are from official JetBrains website. I would really encourage you and recommend go read the case studies of some of the leading players who are using KMP in production for quite a number of years now. Looking at those case studies gave us confidence in 2021 to dabble, at least start with the POC here with KMP, and that's when it took off as well. Another visual that I found really interesting was what parts of your code were you able, like which is the most, shared layer between platforms. And if you see, that's data validation and serialization. So if I reiterate from beginning, it's not just our problem. It's it's not even an industry-specific problem. It's industry prevalent problem with how our rules are just spread across all different apps. Okay, so now that we've dipped our toes in a little bit of a theory of KMP, let's get back to our story and why did we start with KMP POC back in 2021. It's been 4 years now. So it employed Kotlin. Most of our apps were written in Java, and our assumption that Kotlin's interoperability with Java would help us here because we don't have to rig the whole thing, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we don't have to write everything from scratch. That inference was correct. It just worked seamlessly and integrated seamlessly with our project. It's had and still does a strong community support. We've discussed about diverse build targets. And yeah, just proven success with leading industry players. We at least got the confidence to start the POC. And it has really good documentation. If you go to their official website, you find every example under the hood on how to do what. Option to extend to native targets. Like I said, our team doesn't own any mobile platform apps, but maybe my colleagues will have something to talk about next year or the year after that because they are dabbling in both Compose, Multiplatform, and KMP for our mobile apps. Okay, so let's dive into the code. I fear demagogues, and I haven't had like a good experience with demos previously, so I've just stuck to screenshots for now. So if if I was there, I would have been thinking, okay, you're going on and on about this. If I want to get started, what do I do? If I step out of the room and I want to do a POC for my own personal project, where do I get started? And to answer to that is very simple these days. You just go to kmpjetbrains.com and you either use the wizard or a template. You just select what all platforms you want your app to be built to, and boom, you get a project structure out of the box. Wasn't like that 4 years ago, but it's really simple these days. To get started is just a 5-minute or a 10-minute job. Now, hopefully that theory would help correlate with some of the things that you're seeing now. What you see on the screen right now is what I was allowed by my employer to share. So you see common main, which is basically where all those 100,000 rules are dumped. What you see is just a snippet of that. And then you see JVM main and JS main, because like I said, we deal with backend APIs and front-end apps. Now, I'll give you an example what exactly goes into JVM main and JS main. We have a lot of fun methods at work. Let's start with is shipped by boat, because why not? Now, you see both in JVM main and JS main, it's almost similar function, because we have all those rules in the common main. We need a way to expose that rule out to our backend APIs and front-end apps in some way. And that's what is contained in these platform-specific modules. Now, Java allows for more complex and strongly typed code, so you see enum there in the function parameters. That won't fly with JavaScript, so it's string. That's one difference. Otherwise, it's doing the exact same thing. The major difference there is the annotation you see in the JS main, and that's JS export. Now, without this, it won't work for JavaScript, because that annotation is telling the Kotlin compiler that, hey, you need to, this function, method, variable, class, whatever you've annotated with that, you need to make it part of the built JavaScript library with all the TypeScript definitions and everything, because it enables this function to be, it makes this function available as a global object in your JavaScript world, where you can just use it as a normal JavaScript function. JVM static, that has nothing to do with KMP. That's just when you're writing code in Kotlin and you want that function to be accessed statically in Java, you put that annotation there. So how does it look when we call these functions in our backend and frontend APIs? Like you see there in the backend, it's just statically calling shipping rules is shipped by boat. If it's true, then you do something else. And in your front end, you just import this function as a normal JavaScript function and then validate whatever you want to validate in your front ends. Used to feel like magic when we started, but it's been working out fabulously well for the last 4 years, where we just have to maintain one code base. So if I sum it up, you have common main with JVM main, which spits out a JVM artifact. And then you have common main with JS main, which spits out an NPM artifact, which is then published into Maven Central or NPM registry, where you fetch it as a dependency, and I'll talk about it. And we have a robust, huge ecosystem of test cases. So when I talked about manual testing earlier, that is out of the window. My favorite part of my work is if the build is green, we are that confident in the build now that I've deployed to production on my way home in tram. And that's just amazing to do. I'm not saying we never get any production issues, we still do, but there is no manual testing now, because we've written a bajillion test cases to test every scenario there is for those validation rules. Like I said, we have certain plugins to publish those artifacts into Maven Central and NPM registry. And the last point there is basically us telling the Kotlin compiler, hey, do not spit out any native binaries, because we don't need those files. And how we use this dependency, like any other dependency, you just put it in your POM if you're using Maven or Gradle properties, or in your front end in package.json. Like any other dependency that you use, there's nothing special here. Now, one of the really good side effects with doing this project or POC for the last 4 years is that we have a developer site which has like a teeny tiny section about business rules, not the whole gamut, but there are enough business rules there which a developer might need or would be relevant for them when they're integrating with our APIs. And this section in our dev site was always outdated with our API. So we used to get a lot of complaints and questions as to, is your API validating correctly, or is your dev site outdated? Now with this library, the central KMP library, we expose that DSL out onto that HTML page. The library spits out a JSON, which is then helped to build that HTML page. So basically, our dev site is live documentation now. There is no manual update done. Every time we change the library or we make any configurational change or any change to the validation rules, it automatically reflects on our dev site, which has been amazing and a nice side effect with this project. So, have we demystified X? Well, I would say a resounding yes. Our favorite person there has a spring in their step, joy in their heart, and really color in their life. That's what I'm trying to depict. And I've been on both sides of the screen. So I actually feel, yeah, this is just amazing. In the last 4 years, the amount of cognitive load of the team has reduced drastically, because we don't have to worry about what X is. We know what X is. And it's no longer a wild goose chase when we are debugging or if we are working with these apps. But is it all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns? Well, no. It never is. This is my message from like a couple of weeks back, or one is like a couple of months back, where I'm informing my product owner or business developer in the team and questioning my team as to why are we still using this local version from our database? Why aren't we using this, fetching the rule from the KMP library? I would just try to summarize saying that just imagine when you clean out your garage, there's always one lingering box. And that's what this is. We're not done. We are still on the path of, because like I said, there are bajillion rules, so we have to take it one step at a time. But so it's a long trek ahead, but we're not wandering aimlessly now. We know where we want to go, where we know where we want to, what we want to achieve at the end of it all. Okay, some insight gain. That picture is still up on the wall at work. That's still the goal. Of course, we have the centralized rule set. We have high confidence in our code changes. Time to market has taken a nosedive. What used to take months, now adding a new service is just a configurational change. It's not even a code change. So it's just a matter of days. Even with external dependencies on other teams, it's just days from ideation to launching a new service in production under a customer feature or like a user feature. My team is not here, but developers are happy. Mondays are fun. We look forward to come to work and work on this amongst other things that we are working on. We've talked about centralized documentation. My personal favorite is making our product owners self-sufficient. If you remember the anecdote from before where I said the simple request from product owner used to take hours for a developer to debug, that's no longer the case. Kotlin is intuitive, it's readable, it's concise. So now when we get that request, we just share the GitHub file with our product owner. And our product owners are rock stars. I have a talk on this, the whole thing of product owners coding. So not only are they reading the code, they have GitHub accounts and they are coding as well for the last 5-6 years. And that's just amazing because the collaboration with product owners have just improved drastically after doing this. But of course, there have been some bumps on the road. Like I said, we started the POC in 2021. KMP has been stable and production ready since 2023. So last 2 years, it's been like a lot of, what I shared was just a snippet, like the industry players who are using KMP, that list has grown tremendously in the last 2 years since they went out like with the stable version. But we did it back in 2021 when it was not production ready. So I understood initially there was a lot of hesitancy with our tech leads. They raised eyebrows when we went to them and said, we want to do this POC. And mind you, we are using this for one of the most critical apps Posten Bring owns, which brings in a lot of revenue. So I understand the hesitancy before. Library limitation and experimental features, like I said, now this is not the case because it's stable, but when we started off, we had to be on our toes because JetBrains was spitting out feature after feature or changing stuff every week. Kotlin Climb and Gradle Ascent, like I said, most of our apps were written in Java, so there was a shift, but it's not a steep learning curve. If you have your basics right with Java, basics in place with Java, Kotlin is more or less similar. One important thing that we realized was the JS package size. The build JavaScript artifact that was spit out, that got bloated after some time, but with Webpack 5 support, you can do potential optimization, so it's no longer a problem with our team. And my favorite here is piggybacking technical changes onto business tasks. Hope you're aware of that acronym, what's in it for me, because that's what business would tell you if you go to them. And that's why it's taken us 4 years, and we're still not done with this, because nobody will give us money or time to do this technical refactoring for a year. So we have to, or that's why we came up with this plan where we've taken all the business features that we get, and we make sure that we take extra 3 weeks or extra 2 weeks to do this technical refactoring. And I think we've built a kind of a trust with business because, like I said, the time to market has reduced. Like from months to days, they see that. So now when we go to them and say, hey, we need more time to do this extra technical stuff, nobody questions us. And that's like our, at least in my head personally, that's the biggest learning I've taken from this whole project of 4 years. And there was some conflict with the how, because there were 2 teams who were using this library. So initially there was like we were stepping on each other's toes, but that's resolved. And initially we also, just to give some context, we also started off with like just making a network call and not using the library, but the response time we saw drops a lot if you're not making that network call to fetch the rules from a central app, or not library, but like an app. So that's why we went here. We saw that it was faster, it was more responsive, our apps, both backend and frontend. That's why we went with the library approach. And like one would think we have so many different apps. When you're updating something in the library, how does it get updated everywhere else? Which was a problem in the beginning. But now with Dependabot and GitHub, every time something is upgraded here, there is a PR raised in all our apps. And like I said, now that we have a very robust ecosystem of test cases, if the build is green, we just push it to production. And for some apps which are not that critical, there is auto deployment as well. We don't even look at the dependency or like the version bump from the library. So, hope you're ready to entangle your spaghetti and you learned something new, because that was the goal of the talk. Some last takeaways. Just start small, and the key word is flexibility with KMP. Like I said, just iterate and improve. You can start with those pesky constants, which are like in all different apps. You can just start there, dump it in the common library and start using those. Yeah, and then you can see if it can scale for other of your business rules. And it seems like I'm a spokesperson for JetBrains. I'm not. We're not married to this tool, but it has worked out really well for us. If it does for you, good. But if not, there are other tools in the market as well, which you can use to centralize your business rules. Yeah, I'm 5 minutes early. I didn't want to, I can understand everyone wants to just leave. But yeah, thank you so much for listening in, and thank you for joining. You were a wonderful audience. Thank you.